Hello, everyone. Going to hold off here for just another minute or two and let a couple more people get on, and then I will begin our broadcast. All right, everyone, let's get started. Just to let you know, my name is Dr. Scott Thompson. I'm a doctor of occupational therapy and also the director of clinical services at Saebo Incorporated. And today we're going to be talking about SaeboVR. So I wanted to thank you for joining us on our Saebo monthly webinar, and hopefully I'll give you a lot of information over the next 30 minutes that you can take and use for rehab recovery. Before we get started talking about the SaeboVR, I'd like to just take a minute and talk about Saebo in general for those of you who are new to our webinars or new to Saebo. It'll give you some background information about exactly where we came from, how we became who we are, and all of our products. So Saebo is an international neuro rehab company that was founded by two brothers in 2001. And those brothers happened to be occupational therapists just like me. The reason they started the company was because they were frustrated with the lack of options to help neuro patients with no hand function. And I can remember numerous times early in my career where I discharged people that could move their elbow or their shoulder, but didn't necessarily have movement in their wrist or their hand. And of course, if you don't use your hand, then most of the time you don't really use your arm that often, or if at all. Have you ever heard of learn non-use? Well, a lot of times that's what happens. And of course, we want to avoid that, and they did as well. So this drove the two OTs to start experimenting with dynamic splinting for the neuro hand. And from that experimenting, our flagship product, the Saebo Flex, was born. Now, fast forward 15 years from then, and now the Saebo Flex is in multiple textbooks. It's being taught in OT and PT schools across the country. And recently I was told that it's even a question on the national OT exam for the NBCOT. Oh, and one more thing that's really amazing. This November, it's being placed in a 25-year exhibit in the Science Museum of London as one of the top medical devices in the last 500 years. And the whole point of the exhibit is telling the story and the history of medicine over the last several centuries. And so we're lucky enough to be recognized as part of that journey. So that's pretty cool. Also, not just to talk about the Saebo Flex, but also during those 15 years, Saebo developed multiple other products to assist in the recovery of both upper and lower extremity across the entire continuum of care. So we're talking about from day one in the hospital with some type of neurological incident, all the way to people that have research articles written about them that are 23 years post-stroke that were able to make recovery using some of our devices. We currently work with over 4,000 hospitals in all 50 states in the US. We've helped over 500,000 people worldwide, and we continue to develop and offer free educational resources for clinicians and clients, such as our popular exercise guide, our Saebo Mind mental practice, and educational topics that we touch on our website, our blogs, emails, YouTube videos. We're going to be hopefully coming out with a bunch of new videos and tips and tricks coming soon. And of course, our webinars like today. So one thing that irks me and a lot of us at Saebo is the research shows us that we really aren't doing what we need to recover someone who has an affected limb. So the question we really need to ask, especially those clinicians on this webinar, are we stimulating the affected side enough? So if you look at the research on the left side of the screen, it says that within 14 days following a stroke, the client or the stroke survivor only used their limb 38 minutes out of a 9-hour day. And I tried to think, okay, how can I relate to that? So I tried to only move 7 minutes out of 1 hour. And I'll tell you, I couldn't do it. So it's such a small amount of time. Imagine if 7% of the day you did, or 93% of the day you didn't do anything. Can you imagine how weak you would get? You would lose coordination, etc. Well, that's what happens to the limb because a person's not using it. If you look at the research in the middle of the screen, it's research in 2009 and 2010 showed that the average client during a therapy session only did 23 to 32 repetitions in a 45-minute or 60-minute session. That's 1 repetition every 2 minutes. That is horrible. That's like, okay, take a rest, lift your arm. Okay, take a rest for another minute 58. Oh, that irks me. And then the stuff on the research on the right side shows that during a normal therapy session, in 2015, the research showed that during the normal therapy session, only 4 minutes of that session were used on activity-related arm training. That's just, that blows my mind, to tell you the truth. So that's why at Saebo, we continue to create all of these products to try to help people, not only while they're in some type of medical system or in outpatient therapy, but also in their home. So let me briefly talk about these devices real quick. So in the upper right hand of the circle, we have the Saebo glove, which is meant for people with flaccid or limited finger extension or mild tone, and that is designed to help extend their hand and open their hand so that they can functionally grasp and release and do activities throughout the day, and it's meant to be worn all day long. You have the Saebo Flex and Saebo Reach, and that is a training orthosis, and also the one that's going to be in the museum. I personally have never come across in my career anything else that once I put it on someone's hand, let's say 15 minutes later, they're grasping and releasing. We had a gentleman in one of our boot camps, I don't know, a month or 2 ago, and he hadn't used his hand for over 10 years. We put it on, and all of a sudden he could grasp and release. I mean, the tears that we shared with, it's an amazing device and museum worthy. The Saebo Stretch is in the black color of the circle, and that is the dynamic resting hand splint. I love this thing. It allows the fingers to flex when somebody has tone. So if they're coughing, they're sneezing, they're standing up, they're ambulating, whatever movement they're doing volitionally or involuntarily, a lot of times that tone kicks in and the fingers curl. Well, when you're in standard splints, like off the shelf or plastic ones, a lot of times people press against that and their tone's too high and you get joint deformity and misaligned bones, and it limits the range of motion, etc. So what this does is it has a resting, it has an energy storing hand plate. So when the fingers are done relaxing or the movement's over, you can actually sorry, someone clicked on the little question mark. If we can, let's hold all of our questions until the end. But nonetheless, the Saebo Stretch, when the person relaxes, the energy storing plate then pushes their hand back into the perfect position, lengthening out the tendons, allowing the hand to relax, keeping everything in perfect alignment. We have the in the bottom right corner, we have the SaeboStim Micro and the SaeboStim Go. The SaeboStim Micro is our sensory electrical stimulation unit. And then SaeboStim Go is a wireless neuromuscular electrical stimulation unit. And the best part about the SaeboStim Go is that it is wireless and simplistic. We made it with one parameter. You put it on the muscles by moving the pivoting wings. You turn it on and you turn up the intensity and let it do its job. It is amazing. I have people who have even been scared of using electrical stimulation use this because it's so user-friendly and so comfortable. In the very bottom, we have the Saebo mirror box. That is, if you don't know the research about mirror box, it essentially says if you add it to whatever you're doing right now, unless you're not doing nothing, it has significant improvement on whatever you're doing compared to last week or 2 weeks from now if you're using it. It's an amazing adjunct to whatever your therapy workout is now, whether it's at home or in the clinic. We have the Saebo Step, which is an out-of-shoe AFO that allows you to wear any shoe. We've attached it to sandals and flip-flops. And then everything on the left side of the screen is for in the clinic or in a hospital. And of course, we're talking about one of them today, the SaeboVR. So to begin, what is virtual reality? That's always a great place to start. So I looked up on Wikipedia, and they said that virtual reality is a simulated experience that can be similar to or completely different from the real world. And that makes sense. And when I thought of virtual reality, I thought exactly of that picture on the right. When I think of virtual reality, I think that I have sounds coming in and my vision's occluded and I'm immersed in this virtual reality world that is not realistic and hopefully enjoying myself, right? Well, when I looked a little further into it, I actually found that there's more like 4 main types of virtual reality. So the most commonly known one is definitely the entertainment virtual reality. So we're talking about gaming systems like Xbox and Nintendo Wii, or entire sets like the picture on the right. Meant for entertainment, meant for fun, usually not based off of real world scenarios, but they can be. Then there is educational type of virtual reality, and I've seen it used for surgical training in medicine. I've seen it, I have family members in the military, and they've used it for close quarter combat situations, or learning how to use specific weapons or self-defense. The third type of virtual reality is augmented reality, which is really interesting when you really get into it. It essentially takes the real world and enhances the sensation. So if you're in this real world environment, it increases selectively, of course, but it increases all of the senses that you're used to. So touch, taste, smell, hearing, sight, all of them can be affected, and it's pretty cool. If you see an apple pie on the virtual reality screen, then you can actually smell the apple pie. It's pretty cool. I've experienced it a couple times. And then there's mixed reality, which is the merging of real and virtual worlds simultaneously. So your vision's not occluded, but it is enhanced by the virtual reality. Sometimes this is an entire room that's turned into a virtual reality. But nonetheless, what we're talking about today, the SaeboVR, is a combination of the entertainment type and mixed reality. So before I, again, get into exactly what the SaeboVR is, I wanted to show you, especially the clinicians online, that what research says about virtual reality and how it's good. So in a 2011 research, the group proved that 11 out of the 12 VR approaches that they studied reported improvements in whatever the outcome measures are that they were trying to improve. So 11 out of 12 different approaches showed improvements. That's pretty significant. In 2014, virtual reality training was found to possibly produce greater improvement in motor function when compared to conventional training. And when we say conventional, a lot of times what we do as therapists is we think very linear. We think we're going to move the arm forwards and backwards until we can get that motor planning, whatever, down, right? Repetition. Let's do it over and over until we can get it. But what VR training does is it allows a person to move irregularly in multiple different axes or directions. And they actually, in 2014, said that's probably better than just what you're normally doing. In 2016, there was a study that showed that virtual reality intervention can yield an average of 200 to 300 functional movements per 1 hour. So if you remember back to the earlier state or the earlier slide where I said that research showed that it was only 23 to 32 repetitions per session, I mean, we're talking about something that's essentially 10 times the number of repetitions in the same time period. I would rather use virtual reality than do something once every 2 minutes, but that's just me. Also in 2016, another group showed that virtual reality products improve the entire upper extremity, even though a lot of them only focused on what's below the elbow, like the forearm, the wrist, and the hand. So while you're using the forearm, the wrist, and the hand, you're moving the elbow and you're moving the shoulder and the scapula, et cetera, which is why a lot of the products that we produce, along with virtual reality, are beneficial because you're using everything. And the more you use, the more you're going to gain. And then at the very end, we have something that came out this year that said that VR therapy actually combines the 4 principles of rehab. You have intensity, which means you need to have high intensity with a lot of repetitions to really make progress. It's task-specific training, and especially the SaeboVR, and I'll talk about why. But it's also client-centered, which is what we want to do. We want to do something that someone engages with. We want the biofeedback from the device, which means that the person actually can see the results of their movements and feel it. And then also the motivation factor, which goes right back to being client-centered. So it hits on all the things that research says rehab needs to be successful. So now let's talk about the SaeboVR. The SaeboVR was the world's first virtual ADL system. And as far as I've seen, it really is the one with the most collection of real world scenarios, at least for ADL or IADL training. You know, every once in a while I'll come across something where someone says, yes, we did a virtual reality training with one specific task, like a tea making task, but not something that is a collection like the SaeboVR. That's why when I first saw it, I was like, wow, this is awesome. And of course it was designed by, you know, with OTs and their thought process incorporated. But what's also great about it is it allows you to change the difficulty levels of both physical and cognitive challenges. So if the person's moving very well, but then maybe has some cognitive difficulties, you can challenge them on that aspect of it. Or if they're tired, you might be able to lower the cognitive challenge on that day because their brain's not as sharp as they might want to be while they're participating in it. Great variability. One of the other great things is that when you're doing all of these tasks, again, I said it's sort of client specific, but the SaeboVR allows the participant to functionally challenge themselves and functionally perform simulated tasks that they're familiar with. Okay, like it's better to do things that you know because you already have some neurons in your brain that can help you with your recovery. If you do new tasks, you have to build new pathways, and sometimes it takes a lot longer to learn those things. And then you sort of store it in your short term and maybe forget it. Long story short, the SaeboVR helps people do things that are very familiar to them, that is going to transfer over to the real world because they're going to be doing or are already doing those tasks. And then it also involves having the participant pick up, transfer, and manipulate virtual real-life objects, which is exactly what people do in real life. Essentially, the design is all about function. So what are the benefits of the SaeboVR besides what I've talked about? Well, if you read that first line, function, function, function. Both PT and OT and speech always focus on function. We want people to be functional because if you're not functional, you're not really performing or engaging in life, and your recovery is, let's just call it stagnated or reversed. Again, it's the first virtual reality system that focused on real life self-care tasks. It uses practice and repetitive movements, but incorporates fun and motivating and functional activities. And I've seen people that will really get into it because they want to complete the task. And, you know, I've had this picture on the left is showing someone selecting, looks like tomatoes in a garden. And I remember someone trying to do that, and they were having trouble. They just kept going at it and going at it, broke a sweat at how much they were working trying to complete that task. And their motivations through the roof because they just kept going until they achieved it, of course. And the best part, again, with the ADL tasks is that you can customize the challenge level. So if you think about it, you can customize a person's endurance, their speed, their range of motion, their coordination, timing, and then cognitive demand. And the cognitive demand changes depending on which part of which task or subtask you're doing. It also includes a clinical dashboard so that clinicians can view the client's performance and participation trends. But I actually use that when we're done with the session. I open it up and say, hey, look, this is how many movements you've done. Hey, look, you're doing better than last week. Look at this graph. And like I said, it reports it graphically, and you can choose between line and bar graphs for a bunch of things. And then I'll talk a little bit later about the clinician dashboard and some specifics, but I love it because it gives you a lot of data. And of course, when we're writing short-term goals and showing progress, you have to have data to support what the person's doing. One other great feature is that you get to meet Claire. Claire is SaeboVR's virtual assistant, and she functions like, I think, an OT would when you're out in the community. You know, she changes the way that she helps you. She grades the way, she gives you feedback, I should say, by changing the way that she cues you. So in the beginning, she gives you instructions and lets you try to do something. And when you're doing a task and you're not being successful, then she gives you verbal cues. And hopefully you can continue the task from that verbal cue. And if you can't do that, then she gives you a visual cue. And if not, then she says, okay, well, we're going to complete the task so we can move on. And that's exactly what a therapist would do. I think it's a great addition, and she's, of course, very nice and pleasant. So she's great to have in the game, and I really appreciate it from an OT standpoint. So here are some of the examples of the sample virtual occupations. And again, occupations are chosen tasks or things that we performed throughout the day. So these are all the ones that are actually in the SaeboVR. You have grocery shopping, then you have to put the groceries away into like the freezer, the fridge, cabinets. You have to prepare breakfast. You know, a lot of us have pets. So this one has a dog, and you actually can choose a different dog avatar. You can also choose a different avatar for who you are. But for your pet, you always have to go to get supplies. So you have pet shopping. You have feeding your pet and keeping, giving them water and food. And then you have bathing and grooming. So you have to brush them and dry them and wash them and scrub them and shower them. And, all of these things, the gardening, the preparing dinner, volunteering, feeding yourself, they're very lifelike. And a lot of people show a lot of engagement because they can relate to those tasks. So who's a great candidate for SaeboVR? Well, of course, it's anybody that has, and of course, we look at it from the clinician side because this is only approved by the FDA to be used in clinics and hospitals. So unfortunately, you can't use this at home, not yet at least. But patients with cognitive and upper limb impairments, and it can be in varying stages. They need to be able to follow commands, but there's even, I've seen it used with patients that do not have like a neurological issue or an upper limb issue, but they need to work on endurance, like COPD, et cetera. So that's why I sort of left it blank there with patients with, because I forgot to put those three little ... You also can assist someone who might not have the physical ability to necessarily do all of the tasks. And you can use that when combining with other Saebo modalities. So our Saebo-MOS is our zero gravity arm support. And actually in the program, it's written that it'll recognize that it's using the Saebo-MOS and allows you to continue with your progress as if it wasn't there. And then again, you're measuring the data and improving, et cetera. And of course, I love the Saebo-MOS and could go on and on and on. But a couple months ago, I did a webinar on the Saebo-MOS and the Saebo-MOS Mini. So if you want to know more info on that, go to our webinar page where you hopefully signed up for this, and you can watch that 30-minute presentation. You can combine it with the Saebo MyoTrack Infinity, which is that sort of one-stop shop that we have on our clinical electrical stimulation unit. You could also combine the SaeboStim Go. We've done that using it on the shoulder. You just time it with the actual contraction and then help the person participates during the contraction to complete the task. You can combine it with the Saebo glove to increase the amount of grasp and release practice that people are doing. You can also have the person assist their affected limb with their unaffected limb like they would do normally in real life. You know, give it a little support or grab it by the wrist and guide it to where it needs to go. And then, of course, a clinician or a caregiver, if they're participating in the clinic, can do hand-over-hand assistance if that is really needed. So here's two examples of using some of our Saebo products. The picture on the left is someone using the Saebo MOS and also getting some, and the Saebo glove, I apologize, and also getting some hand-over-hand assistance from a clinician. On the right, they're using the Saebo MOS Mini attached to a table, and they seem to be doing just fine with the gardening task. I mean, she's reaching across midline, which is sometimes difficult for people. So I said that I would talk about the clinician dashboard, and one of the things that I love is how many objective measurements and how many different ways it can be shown. So the clinician dashboard collects all the data on multiple different objective measurements. And we as clinicians know that documentation and continued therapy depends on what your measurements show. And they have to show some type of progress. And then, of course, sometimes we're not making progress, which is why I also love that the clinician dashboard gives you so many options. So you don't have to write 5 million goals. You can say, I want to increase my activity duration and my peak hand speed. And then if you don't achieve one of those two, discharge that goal, write another one. I am now going to work on my average motor score and my subtask completion time. And you can continue to work on specific tasks, showing that the person is progressing. And of course, when you look at things like on the graphs that are shown here, these are the sample reports, and you can show in your data. You can take pictures. You can export this on a flash drive and then print it out. You can show all those things and then incorporate it into your notes, so that you can continue to show that progress that the person's making. And it, again, doesn't have to be based on just one thing. It gives you so many different variables that you can focus on. And in fact, like some of my favorite ones are the normalized hand speed, which is like a great way to show smoothness of movement. It essentially takes like the mean speed of the arm and divides it by the fastest movement, which is the peak hand speed. And that Saebo Connect, or the Xbox Connect, it actually has the ability to do all the physics calculations so that it can produce all of these different variables and these objective measurements like you need. So to sort of end our session, I wanted to talk about some of the SaeboVR research that's out there. So in 2015, there was an original study done by Adams and a group of other scientists, and they used the Fugl-Meyer upper extremity subscale as well as the Wolf motor function test and measured different variables of the participants, and they were all chronic stroke participants at least 9 months out from stroke. And what they found was that, well, let me explain first. Essentially, the control group did nothing. They got no therapy for 8 weeks. The intervention group got 3 one-hour sessions per week for 8 weeks. And then they took a pre and post assessment. So what they found was that for the intervention group, the mean Fugl-Meyer upper extremity subscale score increased by 6.1 points, while the control group increased by 0.5 points. That is clinically important and statistically significant. They also found that the intervention group, when they took the mean time to complete the 15 subtasks of the Wolf motor function test, on average, they increased 5.1 seconds, whereas the control group actually slowed down by an average of 0.3 seconds, which was also clinically important. And then they also looked at the functional assessment, which is a rating by the clinician on the Wolf motor function test, and they found that the intervention group improved by 0.48 units, whereas the control group actually went down by 0.11 units. Again, clinically important and statistically significant. On top of all of that, they showed that chronic stroke patients, who are usually the ones that have the most trouble moving their limbs because they've been stuck in those positions for a very long time, they achieved almost 200 functional reaches. I think it was like 198 per session, 3 sessions a week for 8 weeks. We're talking 4,800 repetitions on average from the participants. That's pretty significant. Now, there was further studies in 2015 by a different group that said they looked at people and their want and enjoyment of using the SaeboVR, and they found that 98.6% of participants showed a positive attitude towards using the SaeboVR, and 97.6% of them found favorable opinion of wanting to use it. I can't ever think of anybody that agrees 97.6 or 98.6% of the time. I've never been in a room where everybody agrees on something like that. To me, that's impressive. In 2016, another group found that the SaeboVR leads to improved upper extremity function following stroke. So they compared it to regular function and found that using the SaeboVR, it improves your upper extremity function, using, of course, a function scale. And then in 2019, they actually used some very specific sensors for the hand and found that when you incorporate that into all of the dynamics that the SaeboVR gives you, they actually found it is a valid indicator of a stroke patient's upper extremity motor ability. Essentially, it relates, what it shows correlates perfectly or near perfectly with what upper extremity motor tests would show in real life. I think that's pretty strong research. Now, I want to let the clinicians know that if you'd like to or are interested in learning more about this product, you of course can go to our webpage at www.saebo.com and look at the SaeboVR and all of our other products. But you can also call our 888 number that's on our webpage and request a 30-minute live demo for you and your facility. And you can see how the SaeboVR works and ask follow-up questions. And when I was a director, anytime I did that type of call, I always incorporated clinical and administrative and marketing, as many people that are sort of involved with that decision making, just so that they could see some of the cool stuff that's out there in the rehab world. You could also, following that live demo, opt for an additional free 10-day in-clinic demo. It's like 2 weeks, but of course, most of the time our clinics are only open for 5 business days a week, sometimes 6. But remember, it's all free. There's no obligations. It's absolutely free. It's just, we know that the product works. We know and see how beneficial it can be and want to share it with you all. And of course, all the clients. I mean, like I said, we've helped over 500,000 people in the world, and we continue to. And then, unfortunately, again, this is not available due to the FDA regulation of it being only approved for clinic and hospital use. But any of our items that you need for your clients, don't forget that they get a 30-day money-back guarantee. The item ships directly to the user's home. They can try it, they can wear it, they can use it. Most of the time, I find that people buy or request multiple different products to try, and then I had one lady that requested 4 of them, and she said, you know what, I don't think this one's working because really I didn't even really get to try it, but these other 3 are doing great. So she sent one of them back and kept 3, and her progress was phenomenal. I mean, I love Saebo products, and if you don't know about them, or if you're one of the clinicians that are afraid of doing or sharing information out there, again, the way I view it is this: as a clinician, I want to give any option I can to my client to get better. And I love that Saebo, one, has great products, two, makes it very affordable, but three, gives you 100% money back guarantee. So I want to thank you for joining me on this webinar. And now I'm going to take a little bit of time to answer any questions. If you're on your cell phone or on a desktop or another, if you have any questions, you just click on the actual question part of the control panel, and you can type in a question if you have any. I also want to let you guys know that there are our products aren't always available in all, we're an international company, as I said at the very beginning. So just bear in mind that the free demos are for US clients only. We have a web page. Actually, one of the spots at the top of our web page is for our global partners, and you can click and it'll take you to a map that shows you where all of our different distributors are, and then you can talk to whoever your local representative is. So, all right, here's a question. It says, typically, how long is the therapist-patient session in an outpatient clinic? So, I've seen it vary. And the reason is that the way that outpatient bills, at least in Medicare, there's something called like an 8-minute rule. And so the first 23 minutes, like 8 to 23 minutes, let's just think of it like every 15 minutes. Every quarter hour is something that is, you can mark like a check for how long the session is. So I've seen some sessions where someone comes in and you're checking up and you're saying, hey, how's everything going? That's great. Here's some more TheraBand. Great to see you. And 15 minutes, the person's out the door. I've also been with people in outpatient clinics where, an evaluation runs long, or the evaluation turns into a treatment period and an hour and a half. So the typical treatment, I would say, is about 45 minutes to an hour. And that's why when I was talking about the research at the beginning of the webinar, that's exactly what I was saying. It's about 45 minutes to an hour session. I'll wait another minute or two to see if anybody else has any more questions. Please feel free to ask any clinical or technical questions. I love this device, and hope that we can let you or your clinic try it. And if there are any clients or patients online or on the webinar right now, feel free to suggest it to whatever place you're working. I've worked across multiple states, and there's a lot of people out there that don't know about a bunch of products that are out in the world. So I just believe in Saebo's products because they're real high quality. Let's see, we have a question here. On an average, how many sessions before you see carryover in function? Well, it really depends on the person. And I would love to say that there's a standardized answer to that. But if you look at the research, even especially in outpatient therapy, there's so many contextual factors that get tossed into the equation that you can't necessarily give a direct answer. You could be the client that goes home and does everything 110%. You could also have a client that goes home and does nothing. So there's going to be so much variance that therapists can never tell you that. It's if you follow what your therapist is telling you to do, you should see carryover very quickly versus in longevity. How about, what has been the experience of clinicians using this in practice? Well, a lot of people found that they weren't sure how to incorporate it because not a lot of clinics, and again, like I said, I've worked in 9 different states. I was one of those traveling therapists. A lot of clinicians didn't know how to use it, which is why we said, okay, we need to figure out how to educate you guys better, which is why we offer the live demo to start, because it shows you how it works. We also incorporated some other things, and over the past couple of years where everybody started being able to use it a lot quicker. And then they say, oh my gosh, all these people love it. Or our clients love it. We love it. It is so fun. I know when I was describing a client earlier that there was someone who just wouldn't give up. Their motivation was elevated. And this is the type of person that was sort of, for lack of a better term, sluggish during the therapy session. But then they got on this and boom, they were engaged and ready to go. I know that I've seen people that have done over 130 repetitions in about 15 minutes of work, breaking sweat, saying that their shoulders, tired. Like that, it's fun, it's engaging, and again, the people can relate to it, which is why there were those high numbers in the research that show that 98.6% of people said, I like it. Almost 98% said, I want to use it. All right, are there any more questions out there? Let me remind you too, at the bottom of your control panel for the go-to webinar, there is a handout section, and I have put a flyer for the SaeboVR in that section, as well as our Saebo solutions, that ring of all of our products at the beginning. And I hope that you can download those real quick and then take them back and give us a call or contact us via our website, etc. I hope you all have a great day, and thank you for joining us. Also, this recording will be up and live, I want to say either later tonight or early tomorrow. And all you have to do, for anybody that's interested in seeing this, of course, it's being recorded, so you just go to the webinar page where you signed up, type in your information, and it'll immediately start playing for you. I thank you for joining us. And one thing I didn't put in there was that we have a webinar next month, and that's going to be on our, I should say, infamous Saebo glove. Everybody loves that product, and I'll be talking about that in more detail next month. Thanks again for joining. Have a great day.